Okay, so for everybody that's interested in floggers, we'll talk about the falls. The nice thing is that you can do them any way you want. You can cut them to any size you want. When somebody tells me they want a flogger, and a lot of times people don't know what they want, they're like, I want a flogger. What do you want? I want a flogger. I will typically cut my falls to 18 inches, and I will typically, if my leather's thick enough, like the Buffalo, I'll do 40. These are all half-inch falls. So in order to do that, you will need, this is an important requirement, you can get around it a little bit, but I recommend not. You will need a sheet of leather at least as big as your falls. So if you're going to do 40 half-inch falls, you need a piece of leather 20 inches long, at least. Give yourself a little bit of edge. Anybody done any sewing? You always make sure they leave an edge on, right? There's a reason for it. 20 inches, and then however you want to do it. If you're going to do 20-inch falls, 20 inches long, and you're going to have 40 half-inch falls, you need 20 by 20 leather. That's it. It's a requirement. If you can't find that, if say you found a really long piece that's narrow, you can cut it into sections of falls and then bind them together. That is an option. I always recommend doing it as one. These are two because I'm doing two colors. Go figure. I couldn't find a two-tone cap. Now, cutting them. People always ask me, how do I cut my falls? And I say, however the hell you want. Doesn't really matter. Some people take a ruler and use like an X-Acto knife, a utility knife. It's okay, but leather is really finicky, and if you start to cut leather, again, like this. If you've ever cut anything like fabric, try to cut fabric with an X-Acto knife and a ruler, and the fabric starts to shift underneath, and your falls kind of look like this. And that's okay if that's what you're going for, but you know, like I said, I tend to be very anal about the way I like things. So what I actually do, and another thing that people do, sorry, I should have said, that gets a better result are wheel cutters. You see them in any fabric store, any craft store. They're like 60 millimeter, and they roll, and they tend to put less tension on, which means your leather tends to kind of shift around. I, again, am not that fancy. I'll tell you this up front. All of this stuff can be done with simple tools. These are scissors. Familiar with scissors? What I do is I use a ruler and a very, pens with really easy ink flow. So felt tip pens, like Bic fine point pens, or not Bic, Sharpie ultra fine tips, or Uniball roller pens. And I use the same method. I use a ruler and a square, and I measure them all out, and I mark them with pen. Black is great because you can actually mark it on the face, you don't see it. The trick to that is you hold it under light and the ink reflects under the light. Scissors. That's how I cut my falls. People are like, oh, how do you cut your falls? You'll notice these are 3-inch scissors, takes a while. You know, I could get scissors like this, but I haven't yet. My head. Now, there are all kinds of ways that people attach their leather to their handles. This is the way that I do it, because I find it easy. It saves me having to dick around with a lot of individual pieces. And it may seem a little bit counterintuitive at the beginning, but there is a reason for it. And we're going to get into fall attachments later. I may not actually braid this whole handle, I'll just show you how to do it. All right, piece of tape. Now, it's kind of like cooking. Anybody ever cook? If you ask somebody that you know how to cook, you ask them something like, I learned how to cook from my mom. My mom's a great cook. So I'll ask her a question, like, Mom, how long do I cook this turkey? She'll say, till it's done. How the fuck do I know when it's done? Right, that's the yeah, exactly. My mom, you'll just know. No, if I knew, I wouldn't be calling you on the telephone. It's the same thing with leather. I try as much as I can to be specific about things, and this is why a lot of people don't do it. Your oven may be hotter. If I tell you to cook it at 350 in an hour, it'll be charcoal, right? You want to lay your leather out at a 45-degree angle. 45. If your 45-degree angle doesn't work, pick another angle. Like, don't sit there going, you can't make it work at 45. What the hell? I can't. Change the angle. And I'll give you a trick on that in a minute. So, lay it out at 45 degrees. 45 degrees. 45 doesn't work. 45-ish. We'll call it 45S. How about that? So what I'm doing is I'm laying my leather out on this piece of tape. And I'm leaving myself enough room at the top for another piece of tape, intentionally. And you'll see why in a minute. So, 45 degrees. And this whole tape thing will make sense in a second. Okay, so now I've got my leather. I've got my handle. Everybody can do whatever they want. I always start from the top. It's just because, I don't know why, it's just what I do. Lay it down on the tape. Roll, so that you know, see now all my leather is in the same straight line. See how that works out? See how handy that is? And that's how I get my leather laid out. Now, tape is not going to hold your leather there. That's why we leave the space at the top. This is when the wax thread comes out again.
I missed it, go back.
Did you? All right.
This is why the tape will not hold it there forever.
Exactly. Once you have the leather laid out, I just roll the handle in the tape. You see? And as I said, I leave a space at the top because the tape will not actually hold the leather for braiding. It requires too much tension, plus... No, it's flat. It's right up. 45, I'm telling you.
Ish.
45-ish-esque. You know, somebody else wants to teach the class. You're welcome to it. So then what I do is I leave myself enough room at the top for another piece of tape. This is why. Because I can get enough tension with the wax thread that this actually will put enough tension on to do the braid. That's why I do it. So, we tie off the top, and you want to get all your strands as flat as you can. And get them right up to the top. And put enough around that you can get, like I said, enough tension. Do people want felt light? Show of hands. Felt light, anyone? Felt light? If you've ever seen my pictures, there's a picture of my hands on felt light. And they look like I've been playing banjo on a meat grinder. Because you have to, you know, somebody that I respect a great deal said if you're not getting blisters braiding, you're not doing it right. So, always, I mean, tension is key. So now all I'm doing is using the tape so I don't have to put a knot in my string. And then all we do is peel the first piece of tape off. And we are prepared to commence braiding. All right? So,